Welcome to this first lesson of facial expression and emotion. And in this lesson, we're going to look at how the face moves and the areas that we're going to be focusing on when we deal with achieving good facial expressions and, of course, as well, the emotions that are associated with them. And the first thing that I want to point out is that you don't really need to learn crazy facial anatomy, even though we've got this model in front of us here. You don't really need to learn this. Rather, we want to learn the subtleties of using certain features of this. All right. It's important to note that the face has a very broad range of movement, and usually a movement in one zone can impact the movement in another. So discussing the key areas we're going to be focusing on, number one would be the eyebrows. The eyebrows are obviously very pivotal in expressing, and they sort of appear around here in terms of that muscular zone. The second area that's pivotal for us to learn would be the eyes and the upper eyelids, right? The eyes and the eyelids. And then our third most important area that we will be learning is the mouth, the corners of the mouth, the movement of the mouth. So the mouth and the lips. All right. And with just these three key areas and a little bit of extra knowledge, we'll be able to express and be able to draw in a variety of expressions in our characters. Now, the key thing to remember is that because there's a range of movement, as I said just now, when one thing moves, it usually affects the other. Usually with the face, whenever the mouth is moving, we're usually having some kind of skin movements happening in one direction or another across the surface of the face. Now, of course, different expressions cause different movements. For example, if the character was shocked, we'd see a compression here of the furrowing of the forehead area. We get some wrinkles here. Characters, of course, can scrunch their noses. They can close their eyes. They can squeeze. They can have huge smiles that cause their cheeks to compress, changing the bottom eye line, which is a very important key thing for us to note. So just kind of think very much about our principle of squash and stretch when it comes to the face, because this is a location where we use a lot of squash and stretch as things are moving and squashing and compressing and stretching around. All right. Now, something else that we want to be aware of when we're dealing with the face is the range of mechanical movements on various elements. So the two major mechanical movement areas are, one, the upper eyelid over the eyeball. And the upper eyelid, I'm just drawing a basic hinge type of diagram here. The upper eyelid has a very broad range of movement over the lower eyelid. The lower eyelid doesn't really move that much. It does move, but it doesn't really move that much. It kind of squeezes in when you blink and do things. And generally speaking, the only time the lower eyelid line here is modified is once again when the cheek is being compressed, because the mouth muscle is moving up and compressing it. Okay, so this is our number one big mechanical movement, and our number two big mechanical movement is in fact the lower jaw. So the upper jaw is stationary. Let's just draw it like that, but the lower jaw has quite a range of movement as well. And it's important to remember this. I know it's kind of obvious, a lot of this stuff's kind of obvious, but when we're drawing, sometimes we wonder why something may look strange, and sometimes, you know, you may draw the upper jaw moving or something like that. So let's just be aware of that. And once again as well, applying squash and stretch to that. If the lower jaw moves, the cheeks stretch, the face stretches, and the entire length of the front of the face increases a little bit. So we want to take this into account and think about these two big mechanical movements that are happening. All right. Now, some few final words before we start jumping into the detailed areas. You want to really try to shy away from doing basic expressions. So basic expressions like sad, happy, and angry. And you will get a document with this module with a bunch of words that allude to or describe complex emotions, all of which are easy to achieve using our eyebrows, our eyes and our eyelids, and our mouth and lips. All right. But you really want to avoid doing sad, happy, and angry emotions. You want to really think about how your character's feeling for example, optimistic, relieved, these more complex emotions, and then try to think about how you might animate their face in a way, draw their face in a way, or express with these elements to achieve the desired look to match the way the character's feeling on the inside. All right, so we really want to avoid these default emotions of sad, happy, angry, and even neutral. I would put neutral in there, but there's no space, but even neutral, we want to kind of avoid neutral, unless of course there's a reasoning why you want to use sort of a blanket kind of emotion, or a very basic kind of emotion like that. All right. Now, other things we want to keep in mind: humans are really good at reading emotions. Okay, humans are pro emotion readers. Okay, that makes sense, right? Humans are professional emotion readers. All right, and because of that, when we make subtle changes to these elements, the eyebrows, the eyelids, and the eyes, and the mouth and lips, people will immediately perceive a different emotion. And as we move through this, you will see how these subtle changes have a major effect on how the expression is changed and perceived. Just by moving a mouth line here, or an eye line there, or an eyebrow, you can really have a massive impact on the expression when you make small subtle changes to the lines and the shapes of these expressive elements. All right, this is the basics of how the face moves. So let's move on to the next lesson. Welcome to this lesson on keys to expressing with eyes and eyelids. Please just note before we start, this is not really a lesson on how to draw eyes, although we will draw a few eyes. It's more a lesson on expressing with the eyes, or the elements of expressing with the eyes, to help our overall facial expression that we will try to achieve with all the elements. Please feel free to refer to Module 3, where we talk about drawing the eyes. All right, let's get into it. So the very first element that we want to look at is an element of squinting. And let me show you the effect that this actually has on the appearance of the life in a character. And when I was first shown this, my mind was literally blown at the concept, because I never realized the entire time that I was in error, so to speak. So typically when we draw eyes, we will tend to draw them. I've drawn some cartoon eyes here. We will tend to draw the iris and the pupil directly in the middle of the eye, more or less, right? So we'll do something like this. Okay, iris and pupil, iris and pupil. All right, and if we draw them randomly, you know, really crazy, the character looks like they're completely bonkers, right? So there's something clearly wrong with that character. However, the key, or the secret that was told to me, was that I should draw the eyes slightly squinted, because it makes the character appear to be looking closely at something, right? Or looking at something, should I say, that they're actually focusing on looking at a particular object. Right. So this idea of slightly squinting the eyes makes the character appear to be alive. So let's add a little nose and a mouth to each of these. Okay, barring the bonkers one, because that one's just crazy. When we compare the difference between 1 and 2, you can see that 1 kind of looks a little bit zoned out, as if maybe he's in shock or he's being controlled by somebody. And sure, 1 is definitely contextually useful if you want to draw characters that are kind of spaced out or something. But 2 would be more correct, where the character appears to be more alive, like they're focusing on something. They're not on drugs or something like that. They're just alive, and we've captured them in a moment of time. They're looking at something, an object, a person, a pet, or something. They're looking at something. And this happens in reality with us normally. Whenever we look at something, our eyes will zone in, and we never, if this were our cones of vision poking out of our eyes, we would never look at 2 separate cones of vision. The cones always, this is a top view by the way, the cones will always cross, right? As we look at something and we get a 3D view of that object. All right, so we cross the cones of vision, they kind of join each other. All right, so we're focusing on things. So when you're drawing your characters, 9 times out of 10, you will want to draw the slight the slight squinting happening to make the character appear that they're looking at something. And this small, tiny little detail will have a massive impact on the believability of your characters, an absolutely massive impact. All right, so that's our first thing that we want to keep in mind. We want to keep this idea of squinting, right? So it's our first tool. Squinting, slight squinting, of course. If we squint too much, the character will look crazy. But then we have another tool as well, and this tool is dilation, right? The dilation of the actual pupils. Are they really big or are they really small? And dilation, of course, really just scales up and down based on the feel that you're going for. So we can have really huge, open, nice open pupils, or we can have really tiny, small, little dilated pupils. And with big, really big pupils, generally the feeling is that the character is either in an area of low brightness, so there's not a lot of light, so the pupil opens up to allow more brightness in. But this is also used to make the character look cute, which you've probably seen this happen quite a lot, and it also is used to make a character look a bit goofy or softer, right? It softens characters a little bit when they have very big pupils, right? But dilation, on the other hand, has some adverse effects, I suppose you could say. Well, the first one is really that there is very high brightness. So if the character is looking into something very bright or a very bright light source or something like that. Additionally, where they're showing focus, extreme focus or extreme interest in something, like they're analyzing something really up close, so they're really, really looking at something and studying something. And then last but not least, where they may be shocked, in a state of shocked or in a trance or something like that. All right, so we've got our number 2 element here, which is dilation. We can control dilation. Like many things in art, there are going to be 3 elements, the rule of 3, as they say, where we have 3 big things that we can control. And when we work on those 3 big things, we can actually mix and match them to have quite a broad range of controls. And our number 3 thing, combining our squinting with our dilation, we have one more tool at our disposal, and that is eyelid coverage. Right, eyelid coverage, and that coverage refers to over the iris and the pupil, right? So over the iris and the pupil. Cool. And we can separate our eyelid coverage into 4 examples, and I'm going to go through them now with you. All right. So the first example is that we have no coverage of the eyelid has no coverage over the iris and the pupil. So let's draw in an eye here. Just do a quick rough of an eye. And we have very little eyelid that you can see. So I'm kind of just roughing it in there. And the entire iris is exposed. So we have white space at the top and the bottom and the sides of the iris. And this makes the character look like they're shocked or in a trance, that they're surprised. There is some reason. And this is, of course, also helped by or assisted by their eyebrows lifting up as well. But basically, their eyes are fully open, trying to take in as much as they can see, or something is happening to them. And this particular look lends itself, of course, once again, to shock or being in a trance or being very surprised or something like that. All right. So that's our first instance where we have a fully exposed iris, and you can see very little or you can't even see any of the eyelid. Okay. So let's just say full iris and little or no eyelid line, right? Just say lid line. Okay, and that's referring to the upper eyelid. Just to be clear, the upper eyelid coverage. All right. Our second example here is where we have partial coverage of the iris. All right, just draw another eyelid here, eye again. Okay, and we will just partially cover our iris, and we'll leave the pupil fully exposed, and put in a lid here. And this really is our neutral look. All right, let's just put in shock there, surprise for number 1. Number 2 is really our neutral look. This is, the character could be kind of partially smiling, they could be contemplative, they could be expressing a range of emotions in this instance. But what we're doing here is, by ensuring that we're only covering a little bit of the iris, we're giving them a very neutral look in their eye, right? A very neutral look in their eye. Okay, our third instance here is when we have a half-covered and a large lid area eye. And we tend to draw the lid, the upper lid line a bit more flatly when we're doing this, right? You'll see why now. Okay, let's just draw that down like that. Let's take that out. Okay, a little bit more flatly. And we want to cover quite a large amount of the eye, the iris, and we're going to cover the pupil as well. And because the lid is lowered, we see more of the actual thickness of the lid. All right. So whereas in number 2, we only see a little bit of the lid, or a normal amount, should we say, we see quite a lot more of the lid in number 3 here. And this look is really either a tired look or a sultry look, right? Which you would use on girls, right? A tired look or a sultry look. And of course, achieving that effect is based on the context of the other elements of expression, the mouth and the eyebrows, right? So you need to really use this in a way where it's context relevant. So where you're expressing that the mouth in a particular way and the eyebrows in a particular way, so the character looks tired and not sultry. But of course, if you added a slight smile to the character, for example, here I'm just doing a line there, you can see the character starts looking a little bit more sultry. But if we do something like that and maybe add a few more lines, the character looks tired. All right, so this is the tired / sultry kind of look. And just remember that that is context sensitive based on the other elements that you're expressing with. And last but not least, we then have full sort of closure of the eye. Typically kind of something like that, where we see most of the eye lid, and then our lashes will kind of fan out a bit like this, and we can just indicate something like that, just a little bit of the eyeball poking through the skin, and really this is closed. All right, and closed could be context sensitive for many different expressions. For example, sleeping, peaceful, praying, contemplative. All right, so these 3 elements, squinting, dilation, and of course our eyelid coverage, allow us to perform quite a variety of expressions. Of course, working with the other elements of expression to allow us to create very deep and complex expressions for our characters. Now, the key thing is remembering that you have these elements at your disposal and using them. Don't go ahead now as we move through this module, as you draw your characters, and just not use these tools. These tools are here to be used now. You're now aware of dilation, you're aware of squinting, and you are also aware of the eyelid coverage. So we really want to go ahead and use and implement these keys to expressing with the eyes and eyelids. All right, let's move on to the next lesson. Let's now have some fun with eyebrows. Expressing with eyebrows is great because eyebrows really are quite simplistic. They're generally thicker at the front and thinner at the back, as their general structure implies. And some people would label the front as the head and the back as the tail. And in terms of the movement of the eyebrows, eyebrows generally have a movement of either being high, being mid, or being low. And when they assume these different positions, they change shape a little bit. So when they're high, they're usually an outward C-curve. And when they're low, they're an inward C-curve. And then when they're mid, they're kind of more of a tempered or straight C-curve, just like that, right? So they're a little bit more stretched when they're high, and a little bent when they're low. Now, generally speaking, you can just illustrate eyebrows with simple lines or doing 2 lines and creating a nice shape. And before we get into doing a few different eyebrow designs on these various heads, it's also useful to remember that one property of an eyebrow's thickness can say a lot about a particular character. And there are 2 elements that I'd like to tell you about with regards to this. So generally, when an eyebrow is thicker, this is usually seen as either a male eyebrow, right, or a young person's eyebrow, right? And usually it's very good to put thicker eyebrows on young girl characters because it really enhances their youthfulness that they have these thick, voluminous eyebrows. And thin eyebrows, conversely, are seen as either a woman's eyebrow or an older person's eyebrow, right? So these are some very good points to keep in mind. Now, of course, when we start combining our eyebrows and our eyes and our eyelids and of course our mouths, which we will get to, together, then we can start creating the wealth of complex emotions. However, you're about to see how impactful the eyebrows themselves can be, even on a face that is, for all intents and purposes, fairly static. All of these faces are copies of one another. So let's take a look at us utilizing our high, mid, and low theory, and of course adding in a little bit of exaggeration for the sake of art, where we might bend things in a way where they can't bend, but that's for the sake of drama and really emphasizing that expression. So starting here, let's start with a subtle low brow. And the character doesn't look too impressed. She looks a little bit angry or a little bit upset. Here we can do a neutral brow. And as expected, that looks pretty neutral. How about a higher brow? I'd say that makes this character look a little bit more optimistic. Here we can bend the lower brow. This is a little bit exaggerated compared to reality. Our character looks somewhat sad. We can goofball the brow a little bit. Let's put one down and another one up. And this kind of looks quizzical, maybe a little bit arrogant. And if we really enhance that angry brow shape that we see in cartoons, this is once again a little bit dramatized. Character looks very upset here. And if we do a lower C, the character can look quite focused, as if they're really focusing on something, or as if they're being very, very serious. And perhaps we can put a slanted, surprised eyebrow. And this is more of a quizzical kind of look. Not sure what's going on, or maybe they're curious about something. So you can see the wealth of expressions that the eyebrows can give a character, even if our mouth position's neutral and we have no eye detailing happening at all in terms of expression. The eyebrows are very clear indicators of expressions because they're really just these solid values on the face, these 2 very consistent shapes that even from a far distance can read pretty clearly. But the good thing about eyebrows at the end of the day is that they are actually very easy to illustrate. They're very easy to draw, and of course they're very easy to express with. Just always keep in mind that when you're drawing the eyebrows, you're drawing them on a rounded form, right? So obviously the head is round, even though the face is a little bit flatter at some parts. It's pretty round, so keep that in mind that you're drawing on a rounded form. And that is the end of Fun with Eyebrows. I will see you guys in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're now going to take a look at expressing with the mouth. And as I do this example drawing here, we want to keep in mind how round the front of the mouth is. In Module 3 we did cover this, but I just want to remind us that on the top view here, the jaw will come out something like that, In the 3/4 view, it will come out something like this, for it goes into the cheekbone, and it is very round. It's very cylindrical. Well, it's more or less half a cylinder. All right, so we want to keep in mind that the structure of the skeleton is very much half a cylinder in this area. And that means that typically speaking, our mouth line is wrapping around that structure. All right, it's wrapping around. So we never want to draw a mouth in a way that the mouth is kind of just like a flat line like that. All right. And we want to make sure that we are putting the most focus on the lower line of the upper lip and making this read very clearly, right? So the line that I'm actually drawing here is the lower line of the upper lip. And if I add in a few other lines, we can get a full lip structure fairly quickly. But I want to be imagining that I'm drawing the lower line of the upper lip and ensuring that it wraps around the form correctly. Now, of course, when we're dealing with lips, we can remember that we do have some other lines to put in here based on the angle of the character, of course, which would indicate some of the lip anatomy or the sections or the dynamic forms of those lips. But our focus is that we want to keep this line very dark, especially for the purposes of expression, because this is the line that reads. And the reason it's dark actually is the upper lip does this. This is a side view, and then the lower lip comes down like that. And so a shadow gets cast. Generally, we're lit from the top. A shadow gets cast down here, and so it appears to be really dark. So that's kind of one of the reasons why it's quite dark. Now, moving on from this, the most important, well, one of the most important features of expressing with the mouth are the corners of the mouth, which we want to indicate with little sort of ovular dots. Okay, and you can indicate them in many ways. You can shade it or what have you, but you want to make sure the corners of the mouth read clearly. Let me draw in some eyes here, just some quick eyes. So in this instance, as I manipulate the corners of the mouth, the character could be smiling if I do this, point them up, or the character could be frowning a little bit unhappy. Notice the effect that it has on the expression. Or the character could be quite neutral, right? So here I'm adjusting the corners of the mouth to kind of just be straight out. So think very carefully about the corners of the mouth and where they appear to be. Whether the mouth is open or closed, this would still apply. All right, so the corners of the mouth are a key point. Let's get some notes going here. First note, we want the upper lip's lower line to be nice and dark, right? Because this is what's going to help us read the expression very clearly. The second thing is the corners of the mouth imply expression, right? And this is also why you want to not do the very basic thing of going happy character, neutral character, sad character. Because yes, while the mouth can move in some of these positions, generally speaking, it's the corners of the mouth that are reading. And we also want to remember our roundness of the mouth. The mouth is always really going to wrap around. So with just a single line like this, yes, the character may look to be smiling, but when we add in the corners of the mouth, we can drastically change that expression. All right. And usually there's three positions, down, neutral, or up. All right. So the corners of the mouth are very, very important. Now, something else we need to be aware of, let's make this a little bit smaller, is the movement of the jaw. And this is where squash and stretch comes into play as well. So if we have a character here who is neutral, I'm just going to draw a neutral expression here. And then the very same character next to that character who is in, perhaps let's just say, shock, They're a little bit shocked or what have you. We don't just want to draw a mouth like that as a basic indicator of their shockness. We want to remember that upper lip line as well. But we want to imagine the jaw moving down to accommodate the expression. All right. And so we need to indicate a significant drop in instances of these extreme expressions, right? Because of course that mechanism inside the mouth is going from closed to open. All right. And so we're going to see parts moving, right? We're going to see parts moving. And we need to be aware that we want to stretch the skin. So keep this in mind. It's a very easy mistake to make where you're taking a character, you're changing their expression, they're in shock, they're doing something really hectic with their mouths, right? And we're not moving the jawline at all. All right, so be aware that you want to move the jawline when you're doing big open mouth expressions. All right. Now we also want to be aware that lips can move independently of the jaw as well. And we can get a bunch of different shapes happening with the lips. And then when you combine the jaw movement and the lip movement, you start to get the mouth expressions themselves. So let's look at opening the mouth expressions, looking first at normal open expressions. So normal open expressions are really when our lips are kind of opening from various degrees without any major expression happening. Maybe the character is breathing or they're about to speak, but we have this type of normal opening happening, and we may see a few teeth in there, which usually we'll just indicate with a line also curving, thinking of the jaw, just kind of curving around, and we'll see some of the front teeth. All right. And we can then open this normal position to various degrees. So it can be quite open. Perhaps the character is about to take a bite of food. That's another example where we might want to use the normal open position a bit more. And we simply kind of keep this top lip line at a fairly neutral position. It's not bending in any particular ways. And we're just opening the lower lip more as the jaw moves down. All right. So these are kind of our normal open positions. Then we get our circular open positions, which are things like kissing and whistling and making cooing noises and anything that causes us to have our lips move in a more of a circular shape. And what this causes is the lip line itself to kind of start moving in more of a triangular shape, with the lower lip taking a very round shape. So this is more of a wider circular opening here. Almost like the person's going, oh, or something like that. And then a kissing shape takes on more of an overall circular shape with a lot of compression happening between the lips. And a smaller circular opening here. You can see I drew a circle in my planning for it so that I can really get circular feeling happening. And this would be more of a kissing circular shape. All right, so those are our circular openings of the lips. And a lot of the times there will always be a combination of the jaw and the lips moving together. But of course, kissing can just be the lips to a large extent with a slight jaw movement. All right, whistling is very similar as well. So the whistling and the kiss type of lips, this circular structure is really very similar. And then we have very wide openings. All right. So wide openings are yelling, singing, showing teeth, gritting teeth in an angry kind of way, where we're really showing a lot of the interior of the mouth. All right. So wide openings, we tend to open the mouth really widely, well, obviously, and we tend to stretch out the top lips shape and the lower lip shape really wide. So perhaps in this instance, we're doing a very big smile. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Or if someone is singing, they'll have a very round look to their lips. Once again, I'll do a large circle type of feeling here to really get that breadth of the circularity happening. So it's very round. And you'll see a lot of their teeth anatomy in this sense. Probably their other features of their dentistry in their mouth, but very circular based. All right, for singing. And then a gritting the teeth type of lip movement doesn't really have the jaw moving much, but the mouth tends to take on this type of shape, which I'll draw first, and then I'll draw in my upper lip line to reflect what is happening. There. Right, but always ensure that the upper lip line overlaps the lower lip line. Here you can see the overlap shape of the T shape overlap. The upper lip line always overlaps the lower lip line, so keep that in mind. You always want these overlaps to show. So here we have normal opening. Here we have circular opening. And here we have wide opening. All right. So just going over that again, we want to keep in mind the upper lips lower line to be dark. It's our main line read. So when you're doing your planning drawings, you really can just draw in this line and come in later if you want to and open a little bit, being sure to adjust the jawline, right, to accommodate the movement of the mouth. We want to be very aware of the corners of the mouth for expression, right? Make sure they're clear, make sure you can see them. Okay, they make a huge, huge difference. It's one of the key secrets to expressing with the mouth is the corners of the mouth. And then we also want to be very aware of our jaw movement and our squash and stretch related to that. And really just be logical when you're thinking about the squash and stretch. What is going to move? Well, the skin on the cheeks is going to move. The skin on the side of the jaw is going to move. The mouth is going to open wider as the jaw goes lower and so forth. So just really be logical about it. And then we want to be aware of these three sort of types of opening: normal openings, circular openings, and wide openings. All right. There's one more topic that we want to look at when we're talking about the mouth, because as we know in the overview lesson at the beginning of this module, when one thing moves on the face, usually related to the mouth, other things move as well. Now, of course, you can take this into varying levels of detail, but we're going to look at a key area of movement that really affects characters' faces. And that key area of movement, in fact, let me just take all of these guys because I just need a little bit more space here. That key area of movement for us is the cheek movement. So here I'm going to draw this character's face out. And we're going to give this rough character drawing a big smile. All right, let's keep things basic here. Okay, here's our eyes. So typically we might do something like this. We're focusing on our darker lip line there, and we're putting in our corners of our mouth, very important. And we're drawing in the lower lip line, and we're going for a nice big smile here. All right. And we're going to adjust the chin a little bit and stretch out the skin as the character's smiling. And what happens is we start getting this compression as these muscles pull this way and this way. We start getting a compression happening in the cheeks. If I don't show this compression, we have what is called a fake smile, right? So the character's eyes kind of stay fairly neutral, and the smile is happening, but the eyes aren't indicating that they're affected by the smile, right? And this is called a fake smile. And a lot of the movie stars, when they're on the red carpet, will perform a fake smile because, you know, they're kind of probably tired of smiling after a while for the cameras, and they're not that happy anymore. They're not actually genuinely happy. So this is a fake smile. You can see this guy right here. He already looks like a salesman of some sort. Okay, like he's trying to sell you something. He looks a little bit sinister, right? But when we indicate the cheek compression by adding a line or adjusting the bottom eye line, the smile starts to look very convincing. All right, let's modify the eye lines of this particular character, the lower eyelid line. And our character now has a much more convincing and believable smile. Right? It's a real smile. He looks genuinely happy because we've indicated this compression happening. Now, usually, depending on the style you're drawing, you may or may not want to draw in the compression lines that happen here from the nose, marking out the front of the mouth, moving up and compressing as well. But you can, because it will enhance that smile, because you're showing that, all right, the cheek that was once sort of more flat in structure, kind of like this, is now kind of being compressed into this ball section, and it is now much rounder. All right. So be aware of that. That is one of the key things that we want to do when we want to show real smiles, that the cheeks are in fact compressing. If you don't do the cheek compression on the smile looks fake. And because we're so good at reading expressions as human beings, and we're so good at reading the emotions from those expressions, your viewer may not fully realize it, but they are, if you haven't drawn in these lower lines, something about the image will tell them that it is a fake smile, right? And if that's not your intention, you don't want to have that detract from the quality of your work, right? So we go back to using all the buffalo. This is one of those little things that make a huge amount of difference. And, you know, I think in general, a lot of things in art are lots of little things that all build up to make really impressive and useful works at the end of the day. All right, so that is pretty much that for expressing with the mouth. Let's not forget upper lips, lower line to be dark, the corners of the mouth and how pivotally important that is. the normal circular and wide openings, and of course our cheek compression occurring here, particularly modifying the lower eyelid line a little bit. Makes sense. See you guys in the next lesson. Welcome to this demo lesson on facial expression and emotion, and we are going to be matching the facial expressions to the keywords below and trying to get them as close as possible so that we have a convincing emotion from the character. What I'm doing here, this particular exercise, is something you will also be doing in your exercises for this module to help you kind of stretch your facial expression muscle, so to speak. So let's dive right in. As I get into it, you'll see that it's not a perfect science, so you'll have to mess around with stuff until you get the exact look that you're going for. So I'm going to start here with worry, and I'm drawing this in kind of more of a sort of cartoony kind of style, so we can emphasize the expressions, just make them a little bit more dramatic. And I'm starting off already kind of drawing the eyes at a slight tilt, just a very slight tilt. I don't want to mess with the anatomy too much, right? So they're kind of down a little bit, and she's worried, but she's not sad. So I kind of want to see if I can have her worried expression read. So we're going to give her the typical sad kind of eyebrows, but I think we're going to give her a neutral mouth. So if her mouth is more neutral, I don't think that she would look that sad. She would look more concerned. And here I'm having her look to the right. All right. We'll give her some normal eyelid coverage here. Just want to fix this eyebrow up. All right, so she's a little bit concerned, and then we have to think about her mouth position. So we want her to look worried. Wrap that around, but we're going to drop the corners of the mouth down. She doesn't look particularly worried there. Now, the key thing to remember when you're doing facial expressions is the most subtle little lines can make all the difference. She looks a little concerned, but I think it might be that her eyebrows are just not at the right angle. Right. So I'm going to mess with those and see. Let's lower the eyebrows. And they're tilting up, but they're not going to tilt up too much. And then we're going to see if she looks more worried here. Let's try opening her mouth up a little bit and seeing what that'll do. I'm going to flatten the line out just a bit. Still curving. Open her mouth up just a tiny bit. And she does seem to be a little down. I'm not quite sure if I'm getting the worry vibe from that. I think let's adjust this eyebrow. And so even here as I draw this, you can kind of see like subtle changes of angle even can change the character's expression a lot. So we don't want her to look sad. We want her to look worried. All right. And let's get these corners of the mouth to read a little bit better. She does seem fairly worried now, I think. I'm just going to move her mouth position a bit. I'm not convinced with that mouth. So let's go at it again. I want to keep it more neutral. So have the corners of the mouth not quite pointing down. Okay, there she kind of looks like she's smiling a little bit, so dodge that. And I think that's kind of a little bit of worry. She doesn't look super worried. I'm thinking to myself, what would make her seem more more concerned? Just want to add in a top lip line here. I really feel like if we bring the brow line down, not quite angry, but bring it really close to the eyelid, that it'll make her seem a little bit more worried. And I would say that does look like worry to some extent. Seems reasonable. All right, let's do in awe. All right, so immediately when I think about what in awe might look like, what comes to my mind is wide-eyed mouth in a circular sort of plan. We're going to have to drop that jawline actually. Let's just compress these layers before we do that. And high eyebrows. Just going to get the eyebrows in there really high. And we're going to see very little lids, because our eyes are going to be really wide open. And I think we'll put the pupil right, put the iris right up there. In fact, I wonder if we want to have space above it. Let's see. All right, so we're opening our eyes really wide. She looks pretty in awe already. And I imagine her mouth kind of taking on this shape. We'll have to modify her jawline just now. And you can see here, if I don't modify the jaw, it's kind of harder to buy the expression. So we're going to come in here and we're going to have a bit of squash and stretch happening on her face. Don't want to change the shape of her face too much. Maybe just make this come out a little bit more, make her mouth a little wider. And get her corners of the mouth. They kind of don't line up super nicely there, so I need to change that so that they kind of at least flow together well. And I think we can make this just a little bit wider. Whoops, seems that I've drawn some of this on the wrong layer. We'll just do the mouth again, no big deal. So in awe, she's in awe of something. Let's just see here. We've got to remember her lower jaw is moving down. So I've made it just a little bit wider there. She looks a bit like a robot. Just move those irises in just a little bit. In fact, I'm going to tilt just the upper section of her brows up, just to kind of emphasize her expression a little bit more. And get her teeth in, just easy C curves. And I think I'm not feeling the awe that much with this particular iris setup. I mean, I want her to be in awe. She must be awed, like her eyes are just super wide. So I think here, by keeping that space above and below the iris, we're really going to get that feeling of awe. Trying hard to keep it in there. Maybe we'll give her big irises, almost like the iris is subconsciously kind of hinting at the viewer that the pupil is opening as wide as possible, so that, you know, she can take it all in, right? She's in awe. And we'll see very little eyelid in that instance. Okay, so she's kind of gasping a little bit, like, you know, she's in awe. Do I feel that she's kind of in awe? I do. I just think that we need more squash and stretch happening on the face. So in this instance, it would be stretch. And I don't want to change her face shape too much. I put more of a straight line there just now. I want to give a bit more of a, whoops, that's too sharp. Just a bit more chin as we do that. All right. I think she's fairly in awe. Kind of wondering to myself, does she feel like she's in awe right now? Let's kind of enhance some of these lines a little bit. Yeah, I think she does. She's like, wow. Okay, cool. Let's move on to tired. Drawing her tired. All right, so we're going to do just kind of her eyes in a neutral position. And we want to overemphasize, well, no, let me not say overemphasize. We want to emphasize the eyelid coverage. So there's quite a lot of eyelid that we're going to see here. And we're going to cover the iris and the pupil. And you can see I haven't even put in eyebrows yet, and she already looks quite tired. I'm going to emphasize just a little bit more. Give her some bags under her eyes. Draw a little shape there just to indicate that. And her face is going to be, sorry, her mouth. Her mouth is going to be a little bit down, maybe not super down in those corners of the mouth directions. But she's kind of not excited about whatever's happening in the world, and she wants to go back to sleep. And giving her a very neutral eyebrows. Okay, maybe those eyelid, bottom lid, the bags under her eyes are not working super well. She looks kind of bored here. Not so tired. I think the eyebrows are making her look bored. So we're going to just lift them up a little bit. So that they're in their normal position, perhaps their neutral position. Yeah, and that actually makes her look quite a bit more tired. Maybe her mouth's open a little bit. Because, you know, she's not fully keeping her mouth closed because her jaw's hanging just a little bit. Right. Okay, so yeah, that looks fairly tired. Real smile. All right, let's move over to the real smile here. Once again, we'll draw her eyes in. And I think her brows will be something like this. Kind of optimistic, slight angle. And we'll draw in her upper lid line here. Just got to make adjustments for that one, obviously, because it's 3/4. And we'll kind of plot in the lower lid line, because we know we're going to modify this because it's a real smile. All right, and give her the normal level of lid opening on her eyes. All right. Okay. Maybe she's just received a gift or something. Okay, and we're going to get that smile line in there, mouth line, keeping it curved. We want those really nice pointing up corners of the mouth to show. We'll open her mouth quite a bit. All right. And currently she looks like she's doing a fake smile, but we'll fix that. And let's just expand her lower jawline a little bit. Just kind of opening her mouth up a little bit there. All right. Show some top teeth. And you can see, like, this looks totally fake-o until we introduce the magic tool, modifying the lower lid line into a C-curve, like that. All right. Just clarifying her eye lines here. Just give her a bit of a lash there. Shapes are getting lost. And let's just fix her iris and her pupil. I'm just really fixing the readability of it. Doesn't seem to be super clear. There's a lot of sketchy little lines there. All right, and let's modify the eyebrows. Okay, we really want to get that feeling going. Just fixing up the spacing here of the face. We'll see some lid as well, so let's get the lid line in there. Okay, that is a real smile. Can add in bunching here by her nose too if we want to. I feel like she doesn't have bottom teeth, so it looks a bit weird. Get bottom teeth in there. The lip's going to stretch, so it should technically be thinner than usual. And let's just get this eye line nicer. All right, so that's her real smile. Okay, let's do alluring. So here I imagine her eyebrows low, but in a normal position, not a sad position. And similar to Tide, we'll want to see a lot of the lid. Okay. Where we want to hide that iris and the pupil as well. Okay, that one on the far side is not hiding as much as desired. Can get that lid in there. I'm just emphasizing this upper lid line. And perhaps, I think the eyebrows maybe are a bit dull for an alluring look. I think they would be slightly raised. Slightly raised. Just something like that. Just playing with the tip of it a little bit. And the money shot here is with the lips. Let's get the corners of the mouth to read. And we're going to slightly open the mouth as well. Just a little bit. Now just keep in mind, opening the mouth slightly. You don't need to really modify the jaw that much, but when the mouth is opening broadly, like in awe, you'll definitely want to modify that. Just going to play the corners of the mouth here. This one's kind of up a little bit. Just going to modify the cheek line just a little bit. This is more of a positive alluring, I would say, versus a sort of a edgy. I suppose we could take it edgier. All right. And maybe adjust that smile a little bit more. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I think you can vary the edginess of that, so there's a scale of how alluring you want her to look. But we'll leave that for now. We'll leave that at that. Alright, and Scared. I think Scared is going to combine a sort of a shocked eye with a sort of, let's say, a sad type of eyebrow shape. And of course we can push this to extremes. For example, Terrified would be different as well. And maybe she's even biting her lip. I'll put that in there. So that's her teeth. It's a very simple C shape there. The teeth are biting the lower lip. And we'll have her kind of looking to the right. What's happening? Small pupils. Right. We won't see much eyelid because her eyes are wide open and she's worried. She's scared. And her corners of her mouth here pointing down. Alright, that one is quite quick compared to the others. Alright, and so here we have it. We're trying our best to use the tools we have to get the look that we want in terms of worry, in awe, tired, scared, alluring, and real smile in this demo. I think her real smile, this eye looks literally dumb. I don't know what the heck's going on with that eye. Just want to fix it up. It's bugging me. Okay, that looks really crazy. Let's just get that in there. Yeah, there we go. That looks just a little better. Actually, we wouldn't see so much eyelid. I think that's one of the problems here. We won't see tons of eyelid. We'll just see a normal amount, which from this distance would be a very small line. Very small amount of space. All right. And just add in that cheek line there. All right. So there you have it. I hope this has been useful to you, and definitely create your own grid. I see I've drawn on the blank heads grid here, but nevertheless, the idea is here at number 1 to create a head for yourself with the nose in and the ear in and the hair and so on in, that you can just draw right on top of, draw the face right on top of. Hope you've enjoyed this demo, and I will see you guys in the next module. Cheers.